Hello, everyone. My name is Benjamin Meyer, and I'm an environmental scientist here with Kenai Watershed Forum. And I'm actually coming to you today from Honolulu, where I just presented this talk I'm about to share with fishery scientists at the national meeting of the American Fishery Society. It's been a real honor to learn from both locals and hundreds of people from around the country and around the world. And I wanted to make sure I got to share this with you too. Before we get going, just want to share that our work is supported by and couldn't have happened without the Trout Unlimited Embrace Stream Fund, the Kenai Community Foundation, as well as the Alaska Sustainable Salmon Fund. So just to introduce everyone who's involved with this project, I'm over on the left, and our executive director, Trent Dodson, is in the center, and Alexa Millward with Trout Unlimited Alaska is over on the right. Just to confirm with everyone where we are located, the Kenai Peninsula is, of course, at the northern edge of the North Pacific Ocean, a couple hours south of Anchorage. In this map over on the right, we have the boundaries of the Kenai Peninsula Borough. Um, it's an area about the size of West Virginia with a lot of really diverse landscapes and really diverse fish habitat throughout. So we have Cook Inlet in the center, along with the Kenai Lowlands area in the north. And so we have everything from glaciers and mountains to swamps and everything in between in this region. Um, and I dared to ask this question to a bunch of fisheries biologists at a fish biology conference. I asked them, is this salmon habitat? So I want you to think about your answer to that question too. Take a good look at the picture and we'll move on. And then our next question, I hope, makes you think a little bit more. And I'll ask you, is this salmon habitat? When I look at this picture, I see a body of water. There's some people with a clipboard doing something. Yeah, it's not the kind of classic place that we would think about as salmon habitat, though. I mean, maybe if you know something about their life cycle, we could say maybe they live here, but we don't really know. And then in this next photo, I'll ask the same question. Is this salmon habitat? So in this picture, I don't see a body of water. It looks like maybe it's kind of wet. It's a wetland. Maybe there's something behind the trees over there. My dog in the left corner is helping those biologists do some field work. But we don't know if this is salmon habitat or not. And then finally, I'll ask with this last picture, is this salmon habitat? So in this picture, I see water. I see a flowing stream, but it's been very disturbed. It's been altered by an excavator. And I see a lot of the features missing here that we would think of when we think about what good salmon habitat looks like. So I see all the missing riparian vegetation that's not providing the root structure and shade that's going to help, prevent issues with erosion and help keep the water cool and provide the kind of bugs and insects that fall in the water that juvenile fish eat. Basically, like all the things that are going to help keep this a healthy, intact fish habitat have been stripped from this stream. In this particular case, it's only a mile or two from Kenai Watershed Forum's office, and it's involved with a complex legal case that I won't go into at the moment. But the point is that there is a lot of undocumented salmon habitat or anadromous fish habitat, anadromous being any fish that is born in fresh water, swims out to the ocean, and then comes back to fresh water to spawn. There's a lot of this habitat that is right under our noses that we haven't inventoried yet. It's not on the maps that property owners are using to decide what they want to purchase. It's not on the maps that regulators use when they're deciding what kinds of permits might be needed for a particular project. We have an incomplete inventory of this resource that our community really values. So the point of showing all those photos is that I think we should be using the tools of science rather than just our eyes when we are deciding what is anadromous habitat or salmon habitat versus not. We should all aim to be more like Detective Hercule Poirot, if there's any other PBS nerds out there who didn't always trust what the eyewitnesses told him. So here's what we did to start exploring some more of those places like what I showed you. In this picture, we have Katrina holding a minnow trap, and she's about to plop it down in the water of a stream that you can barely see. It's only maybe a foot wide. But these minnow traps are a passive capture method that allow juvenile fish to swim in. They're attracted to the scent of baits, but then they have a hard time swimming out. So we come back in a day to check to see what we've captured. And very frequently, we caught little fish like this juvenile silver or coho salmon that Alexa is holding. So we would identify them and then just release them after recording the coordinates and the time of date and getting some good photos to confirm the species. So we did that at a lot of different places, but just to give you an idea of the kind of places that we were looking for to do that work, we have some aerial imagery here. This is some imagery from near Sterling, Alaska, just outside of Soldotna. And in the upper left-hand corner, we have the Moose River flowing in. That's that blue, and it's got a pink line going through it too. That is known anadromous habitat. That is in the inventory of known fish habitat in our region. But then in the upper center, there's this turquoise line flowing in. This is just a small stream, and we didn't know whether or not it was anadromous habitat before we went out there. So we went out and we put some minnow traps in, and we caught some little juvenile coho, just like the one I showed you earlier, right at the end of where that turquoise line is. But there's more to the story. On the way back, you can see this utility corridor kind of right along the center where there's a straight line. That's how we walked in. So we were walking back on the way there, and I noticed the stream kind of flowed right across where that utility corridor was. It just kept going. So we put some more minnow traps there, and sure enough, about half an hour later, we found some more little juvenile coho. It's in a spot that looks like this mud pit here, there are power lines going over and ATV tracks. And yeah, it was clearly being disturbed by people and traffic going over it. Um, so yeah, we found fish in a place where not only was there not a stream on, not 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 only was there not fish habitat already on the map, there was not a stream itself on the map. So with this information in this spot, we submitted the data that we collected to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game as part of what's called an anadromous stream nomination. So they review that data, decide if the evidence is sufficient to support including it in their anadromous waters catalog, and if so, this water is now eligible for conservation considerations that it might not have been otherwise. So that applies both at the state level under Title 16. So this can include things like, let's say somebody wanted to improve that pathway where the utility corridor there is, either with an improved trail or a road or something. If there were to be a culvert that stream met, it would be more likely to be required that that culvert meets fish passage standards. So that typically means higher engineering standards that allow for fish passage as opposed to just the flow of water. There are also conservation considerations that apply at the local level within the Kenai Peninsula Borough. So every 3 years, the borough reviews all the new anadromous waters nominations and decide if they should be, if these waters should be in their own 21.18 catalog. This is an ordinance which is intended to provide conservation considerations to riparian zones around anadromous streams. So hopefully I've already made the case for you, but my question is, why do we need better maps of salmon habitat? And my answer is that when you have undocumented habitat, it is unmanaged habitat. And we get more situations like this. I think this is just a microcosm of something that is happening at scale around the state. And the more that we have this happen, the more we're on the same path to other parts of the world that have really experienced terrible declines and losses of their wild fish populations. In our region of the world, despite being a very road accessible place and a growing community, I feel like we really have the opportunity to do something different where we can acknowledge that places like this exist and plan our communities around them rather than directly on top of them. As one of my coworkers or one of my colleagues with Fish and Wildlife Service like to say, once Humpty Dumpty has fallen off the wall, it's pretty hard to put back together again. So you can restore a spot like this, but it's a much better plan for everyone involved to not have to consider restoration options in the first place. Um, so the reason that the situation exists is that currently all Alaskan rivers and streams and lakes are presumed to not be salmon habitat or anadromous habitat unless they are documented in person. Um, this was proposed to have been changed under ballot measure 1, which was an initiative at statewide level back in 2018 that failed. But so we are left with the current situation. Um, we estimate that within the Kenai Peninsula Borough, only about 30% of probable salmon streams are documented. So, using some pretty simple GIS explorations that I won't go into the details of, we estimated that out of about 16,000 stream miles, only 5,000 of what is probably anadromous habitat is currently documented as such. And until these habitats are inventoried, they will not be protected under State of Alaska law or Title 16. That's some text from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game website. Um, yeah, and some more local flavor on this topic, like I was starting to talk about, when these streams are documented in the Kenai Peninsula Borough, it's not the case statewide, but they gain a riparian setback. Um, they gain protections on the riparian zone setback. So not necessarily that a property owner can't do anything within that zone, but they are limited to certain types of developments that are not in conflict with riparian conservation value. So you could probably have a dock or a boat launch or something, but it would be unlikely you'd be able to build your parking lot right up to the edge of a stream under this ordinance. Um, this map is updated every 3 years and requires majority vote approval from the borough assembly. We have boroughs instead of counties in Alaska. And this happens every 3 years. To give you an idea of what we've accomplished with this work so far, we started in earnest. There'd been some work with Kenai Watershed Forum prior to this, but we really got going with my project, at least in 2021. And since then, we've nominated over 23 stream miles and over 1,000 lake acres. And specifically, these are near growing residential areas. These are not places out in the boonies that we had to take a helicopter in or fly into or hike for a couple hours. These are places that were right under our nose. And yeah, volunteers have donated over 300 hours. We've captured over 3,000 fish. And importantly, we've built momentum for continuing this work into the future, as we are currently doing in summer 2024. We have this figure over on the right of a graph showing the number of volunteer hours that have been contributed each year since the project began. And this doesn't include 2024 hours yet, but we did pretty good there too. To give you an idea graphically of what this looks like, here we're looking at a map of near where our office is. So in the inset map in the upper right, we see where we're located in Alaska, just south of Anchorage. And we're inside that red square. And our office, the Kenai Watershed Forum office, is right where that gold star is near Soldotna. And this next map, we see a bunch of pink lines. These were all the known documented anadromous streams and lakes in our little neck of the woods before we started this project. And then in this next slide, we see a bunch of these neon squiggles. These are streams and lakes that we've nominated to the Anadromous Waters Catalog since beginning the project. So you can see they're not that far from town. They're kind of just right off the side of the road, and they've been under our nose the whole time. And finally, in this last slide, I'm going to superimpose the National Hydrography Database. So this is all of the known, or all of the places where we think that there is water on the landscape in one way or another, regardless of whether or not they're fish habitat. So we see all these blue lines, and we see that there's a lot of water on the surface right out our back door, and probably a lot of it that is anadromous habitat that hasn't been documented yet. And I really love doing this work. It's been really fun to connect with volunteers and experience the joy of discovery with them every time we find a new habitat. But also it makes me think, like, could we possibly keep up this work at the pace and the scale that would be needed to document all the anadromous habitat that might be in the footprint of proposed development? I think that it's important we start considering more sophisticated options to understand what we have so that we can do a better job of deciding how to manage it. We have a figure here from Shane et al. 2017. This was a paper I was involved with a couple years ago with some colleagues up at University of Alaska Fairbanks, and we see the expansion of impervious surface or developed areas in the lower Kenai River watershed. So we see areas of high density development in red, lower density development in the yellow and green, but the footprint is expanding. So I think there's more places like that disturbed stream that I showed earlier, that we owe it to ourselves to inventory before somebody discovers that that's what they have on their property without knowing it. So what should we do instead of just, chasing after all these little bits and crumbs of habitat? I think we should start using modeling efforts to understand what we have. There are simple modeling approaches you can take, and there's complex modeling approaches. So a simple one would be a gradient model. So that would be, let's take the map of all the streams that we have in the whole Kenai Peninsula Borough and find the first place that an adult salmon couldn't swim upstream past a certain point. So some people use estimates of a 16% gradient over 35 meters. For example, there's all kinds of different choices you can make when you're exploring that topic. That model is imperfect, I can tell you. And more accurate models can be made by using what's called habitat intrinsic potential approaches. This is an approach where you use more sophisticated statistics and more sophisticated maps and more field work to generate a more complete picture of what's actually out there in the world. So we have an example of that over on the right side here. This is a figure from a white paper by Romy and Martin in 2022, where they used habitat intrinsic potential modeling approaches in some watersheds of Southeast Alaska. And they created models that were almost 99% accurate of where the uppermost salmon or anadromous fish was likely to be found, with an accuracy of plus or minus 66 meters, which I think is astounding. Kenai Watershed Forum is currently a candidate for a proposal with the National Coastal Resilience Fund that would attempt to use some of these techniques within the Kenai Peninsula Borough. So I'll be excited to tackle that project if it comes through. Finally, if you're interested in doing some hands-on version of this work, don't hesitate to reach out to us here at Kenai Watershed Forum. And even better is if you participate and you figure out, or we teach you how to submit your nominations through the Fish Map app, which is a smartphone app released through efforts of all the organizations listed down at the bottom of this slide here, along with the Alaska Conservation Foundation. For each successful nomination you submit through your phone, you will receive $100, which is super cool. You can learn more about all that at alaskafishmapping.org. And finally, yeah, I think we're going to be exploring this topic for several years into the future. So follow us on social media if you want to learn more about it, or you can also check out our website where we have links to more detailed reports and maps all about this. You can access this website by scanning the QR code in the upper right corner. And finally, thank you so much again to my colleagues, Trent Dodson and Alexa Millward, and the many coworkers and friends and volunteers that have helped make this project happen over the years. I am indebted to all of your efforts. Finally, I have some references that were throughout the presentation. You can find them here, and there'll be a link to that website that I mentioned earlier in the YouTube description for this video. So yeah, that's it. Look forward to hearing from you. Look forward to seeing you out there, and thanks for your time.